And our William is only about 7 years old at the time. So he inherits, even though he's a bastard, he's the only offspring.
Yeah.
So he everyone sort of does still agree. And at that point in the 1030s, being a bastard it didn't completely rule you out at all.
No.
In later centuries, it would.
Yeah.
It really would. There's no question. No, you can't inherit. No, you're a bastard. No. But back then, it was a lot less.
Especially if there are no other competitors. Like, there's no one more legitimate. Well, it's got to be you, really, isn't it?
And so, at that moment in time in 1035, it doesn't look good for young William. It's like he was probably be pushed aside or murdered or something.
Yeah.
He's a 7-year-old.
Yeah. What can he do?
Yeah. And so, really, he's in the hands of other men. So one of them is the Archbishop at the time, who was a kinsman, Archbishop Robert. He was supposed to, when his father, Duke Robert, had gone out, he sort of left him in his capable hands. And apparently he was sort of fairly capable, wielded some sort of authority. But he himself dies. The Archbishop Robert dies like a year or two later after that. So again, it's sort of undermines everything. And the accounts say that when that Archbishop Robert dies, that there's kind of anarchy now in Normandy, or something approaching that everyone, not everyone, but all the men of power just start building unlicensed castles. That comes up a lot. And just start making their own thief as their entire own thing, start raising loads of armed retainers without permission to, and all sorts of things like that. It breaks down into... One historian, was it Mark Morris, I think it was, talking about how it becomes sort of a mafioso state, where you just got lots of these families, mafioso-style families, that go around killing each other and generating vendettas against each other and all that sort of thing, and like raiding each other's weddings. And, like the IRA would blow up a funeral and stuff, all that sort of thing, like sort of as cutthroat as it gets in a way. Again, one or two bits I think George R.R. Martin took for Game of Thrones from this exact period, where there's one example of a wedding where they dragged a guy out and sort of blinded him and cut his nose and ears off and things like that. So it is really quite, all sorts of, one of the lines from, I think it would have been from William of Poitiers, said, fierce fires all over the country.
So pretty terrible then.
Yeah, but William the Conqueror, I'll just keep calling him that from now on, did have lots of other, grown-up powerful men to sort of try and look after him. Again, sort of kinsmen or members of his extended family. There's an Alan, Count of Brittany. There's a Gilbert, Count of Briand. These are sort of cousins, basically, or cousins of his father, anyway. But it seems like, despite their best efforts, they actually didn't help all that much, because by 1040, they'd both got themselves murdered.
Oh.
Unfortunately. So again, things just keep going against him. They really do keep going against him.
As we were talking about, like, the 11th century, it created a lot of tough men, and it was dangerous times. And you can see it just describing the internal cohesion and order of Normandy. It's like, people getting murdered everywhere. Mafioso state. Whoever rises to the top of this is going to be a hard man.
Right.
There's no question of it. And if you're 7 years old and your entire life is in this milieu, like, what are you going to turn out like if you don't get murdered? It's crazy.
Just to stress that point then, so absolutely, you're absolutely right. It seems that, doesn't seem that, it is the case, if you believe the accounts, that
there's no reason not to.
Quite often, that he... they'd even do murders of his protectors in front of him and things. I think one of those guys I just mentioned was murdered in front of him. They broke into his keep and cut the guy's throat in the same room with the boy William the Conqueror.
Why are you leaving the boy alive then?
Well, that's great. That's interesting. That's what historians talk about. So so it seems that when you've got a little boy ruling in his minority. You could kill him, of course, but it's actually easier, it's better, it's more stable, slightly more stable, to just kill the guys around him and he becomes your little puppet.
But he's going to grow up.
Yeah, right. So that'll only last for a window of time.
It's and surely he's not going to be happy with the things that happened when he was a child,
There's one or two accounts where he had to be quite literally spirited away, sort of secretly escape from a castle or a keep at night and spirited away because men that did want to kill him had broken in.
Yeah.
So he escapes by the skin of his teeth a number of times in childhood.
Jesus.
Again, what kind of psychology for the adult man does that breed? Well, a very brutal one.
Yeah, and it
by our standards.
And it shows you the world is not secure and constant. Like, that's the thing. Like, you know, like the the English under like Edward the Confessor have got a long period of constancy, whereas William has total like insecurity constantly. Constant security. And like the worst kind of insecurity. It's not like, oh, I might end up poor and destitute. No, you're going to end up killed. Like all of these other guys you've seen murdered in front of you, and the amount of times you've had to flee from your own castles and stuff like that. Like, you're going to want to be strong when you're an adult.
Yeah.
Like you're going to take your martial like inheritance very seriously.
There's lots of people in life who have very, very brutal childhoods, and of course, they're going to grow up to be very, very brutal adult men.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it pops into mind. Stalin had an extremely brutal childhood and early adulthood. Sort of unbelievably brutal in some sorts of ways. No wonder when he's the master of Mother Russia in the Kremlin, he's got no time for
in Tsarist Georgia, I can imagine it was pretty tough.
Like his father almost beat him to death and things. He's sent up to Siberia to freeze to death and survived it all.
Yeah.
And so, now you're you get it. Well, so in 1041, one of his tutors, a Turold, was made another one of his protectors, an Osborne, one of his stewards. That was the guy that had his throat cut in the same room with him.
Right, we need you to be the steward for William. It's like, no thanks. Well, I know what happened to the last 5.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
I'd rather not.
It's a very dangerous position.
Yeah.
Yeah, there will be loads of people out there that want you out of the way.
Yeah.
At the time, as I mentioned, there's chroniclers at the time, like William Poitiers, and then there's chroniclers we've got that are much later, like Aldrich Vitalis. And the ones at the time say they don't really name the people that are doing it.
Yeah.
Because, in fact, we do have a line, again, I think from William Poitiers, where he says, the men that currently surround the Duke are the same men that killed all his... So I'm not going to name them. It's too dangerous for me to do.
Yeah.
But when Aldrich Vitalis goes, no, one of them's Rodolphe of Gassé. He just names him because he's not in any immediate danger by doing so.
Yeah.
So we do know some of these people. And they basically are his...
They're just thugs, right? Like,
yeah.
Murderous thugs.
Yeah, like mafioso types.
Yeah.
Gangsters, yeah.
I mean, it is sounding very much like a mafia film. You know, it's very much like that, isn't it?
And he had one of his uncles, Uncle Walter, smuggled him out of various places at various times.
Yeah.
Historians, exactly as you say, have argued over why not just kill him.
Yeah.
Well, it's because if you've got him, you can say, well, he's the legitimate heir. No one's arguing with that. You know, so you it's sort of a shortcut to controlling policy. If you don't kill him, it's probably better if you don't kill him. But it'll only last until he's old enough to have his own mind.
I bet William was like, I can't wait until I'm 15 and I can raise an army. And I'm going to deal with all of these people. You know?
Yeah. Well, that is exactly what happens.
I have no sympathy for the people he deals with either, to be honest.
Yeah. It's difficult to have any sympathy for any of these characters,
you had this coming, you know.
So the King of France through most of this, or all William's early life, is Henry the First of France. Obviously completely different to Henry the First of Britain, who is one of William the Conqueror's sons. But William the First of France, Henry the First of France is the king throughout nearly all of this. And he does, it seems, support William the Conqueror's claim, because you could imagine that Henry the First of France sees all this instability and weakness and something approaching anarchy in Normandy. You might think, oh, this is my chance to push all of these guys out and take it for myself. But it looks like he's not powerful enough to do that himself, otherwise he might have done. Either way, he tries to back up, or does support, the claim of the young William. whoever his protectors are at that time. So that's sort of interesting to note. But he does want things in return,
Of course.
you know. But the whole thing is just, it's a real mess, is what it is. Now, we get to the point when William the Conqueror is between about 13 and 15 years of age. There's all sorts of sieges and counter sieges and all sorts of craziness going on the whole time. And from some of the chronicles, we see that when he's about 13, he's still just a complete puppet, and the grown-up men around him are just doing as they please in his name. But then by the time he's 15, in about 1043 odd, there's a siege of Falaise, or the relief of a rebellious siege of Falaise. And it seems at that point, when he's about 15, sort of suddenly, he's the man. He's in control for himself. He's not taking orders from anyone. So it's just interesting, because we don't have that in fantastic detail of exactly what changed. But between those two, something profound has changed in those 2 years there. And it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? When you're 13, you're still really pretty much a child. Yeah. And when you're 15, you're starting to be a man.
In this time, they probably did mature a bit more quickly.
Maybe.
Than we moderns understand, because I mean, it's not like William isn't going to have plenty of life experience by the time he's 15. Right.
Yeah.
I've seen more men murdered than you've had hot dinners. I've been carrying a knife since I was 10 or something. And all this sort of stuff, and it's just like, right, okay, these are different people.
There's no time, no room for any sort of extended childhood, or any childhood really at all.
Yeah, his childhood would have been gone.
Yeah, a childhood as we know it, where you're kept in a state of innocence.
Yeah, no, that's gone.
None of that.
Yeah.
None of that at all whatsoever, yeah. By the time you're 15, once again, we said it in the last one, didn't we? If you're strong enough to wear a great helm and wield a sword, that's it. That is the definition. And you're good to go at that point.
It's hard to imagine that William personally didn't want to be martially competent, right? Like, he's going to be like, right, I need to train. I need to learn how to use a sword. I need to learn how to fight, And so, like, and all he needs to do really is get, a handful of loyal men around him, because he's got the authentic claim to get a handful of actually decent loyal men around him, and then you can see how he could start asserting himself. Like, okay, but we can fight these mafioso types. We can actually start, actually returning some order and actual peace to the realm. Yeah. So, good on him, to be honest.
One thing I'd say is that you can say that, but like, the reality is a very difficult thing. So one thing to say, for example, spring to mind, is that Henry III of England, I think he was more like 23 before he got the balls.
Yeah.
Right? So when you do it at 15...
But did Henry have multiple people murdered in front of him when he was 7?
Yeah, no, not. It wasn't as brutal. Yeah,
that's the thing. Like, this is the forge in which he's being fired.
Yeah,
that's a really tough one.
Yeah,
and it's clearly like, I've got to grow up quick, sooner rather than later. That's if I'm gonna live in this.
You haven't got the luxury of just allowing the great men around you to carry on. You haven't got the luxury of that.
No.
Because sooner rather than later, they'll probably cut your throat.
Yeah.
So we've got a great line here from William Poitiers, who, again, was sort of something like a family chaplain, we think. He was certainly there and saw it all himself. He's a primary source, absolutely. He says this about the 15-year-old William the Conqueror. He says, At last a most joyous day dawns, splendidly for all who desired and eagerly awaited peace and justice. Our Duke, adult more in his understanding of honourable things and in the strength of his body than in his age, was armed as a knight. The news of this spread fear throughout Francia. Gaul had not another man who reputed to be such a knight in arms. It was a sight both delightful and terrible to see him hold the reins, girded, honourable with his sword, his shield shining, formidable with his helmet and javelin.
Well, there we go.
He's describing a 15-year-old kid to us, a kid.
But probably fully grown and, someone who's been just training since he was a boy.
There's certain people in history, they seem to hit the ground running, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
and William's clearly one of them.
Yeah. And just as you said, sort of the next main thing is that he starts removing the people around him who are not
Sensibly enough,
and replacing them with people that he trusts, or likes or whatever.
I mean, there are obviously sympathetic people around him. It's just there are a bunch of murderers around him who are not sympathetic, and so okay, now you're 15. You've probably you've developed a man's body and voice, and actually, I've got my arms now, so I can get a dozen guys. We'll break into their castle, kill them. Yeah, let's go do that. Brilliant. Oh, this feels good. Revenge. You did this. Oh, my God. You can see how he'd be totally motivated. Right. We are settling some bloody scores now, lads.
Yeah. Like, for example, I mentioned Rodolphe of Gassé.
Yeah.
He's out.
Yeah. Well, I imagine he killed all of these people.
A lot of them seem to have been bumped off. Yeah.
Good. No sympathy whatsoever.
And just to stress one last time, it's not just the physical ability to do it, but the mindset.
Murdering people is totally normal.
I don't.
You guys made it totally normal. This is what we do in Normandy, isn't it?
I mean, I don't know what it's like for you in your life, but at some point, no, I don't mean that. Sorry, I was just going to say, at some point in most men's lives, or most people, it doesn't have to be. It's not a male, female thing, but in most people's lives, at some point, you realise, oh wait, I can do whatever I want within reason, of course. No, I don't have to take direction from anyone, including my own family, including my closest friends. I don't have to bow to any peer pressure whatsoever from anyone. I'm just going to I've got my own mind now. Well, it doesn't really matter what century you're talking about. To realise that absolutely at 15, it's quite something.
To watch the full video, please become a premium member at lotuseaters.com.